Good day and welcome everybody to today's talk. Today I'm joined by Joseph Anthony, who is the maker behind Pele, the goddess of fire. We're going to have a very interesting talk, asking some questions and also maybe finding out about Easter eggs during the movie. Joseph recorded the eruption of the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii. Uh, Joseph, a big welcome from my side today. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a really pleasant surprise when you contacted me because my film was, I think it was nominated as the official selection last year. And of course the festival didn't, really happen because of COVID. And then yeah, you reached out again, and I was delighted when you asked if I could, allow the film to be screened again this year. So yeah, really excited about that, and thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to the talk.
Great. Yeah. Actually, the reason for it was because this year's open air would have been themed for elements. So yeah, your movie just really fits perfectly, right? There's fire everywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, to kick off this talk, I would like to know why volcanoes, why Hawaii? What's the backstory of that? Because Hawaii is like just for an external
Yeah.
person, so far away. I don't think that many people have the chance to actually visit this country or the island. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I have always had some sort of fascination with volcanoes, going back quite a few years when I saw some images by another photographer to an earlier eruption phase of that particular eruption. So Kilauea is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. Has been kind of erupting on and off for quite a long time, right? So I didn't really have an opportunity before 2017, I think it was. Yeah, 2017, when because I kind of, monitor, with all my other nature and wildlife photography, one of the things I do is I keep an eye on things around the world, that are of interest to me. And one of the things I was keeping an eye on was the reports they give the Hawaii Volcano Observatory. They give regular reports, daily and weekly updates of what the activity is of the volcano.
Right.
So I just, nothing had really been happening for quite a while. And then I picked one up, one little report, and it kind of said there was some changes to the behavior, the inflation and deflation cycles of the volcano at the summit crater, and just a hint of increased activity. And I just thought, I had a window of opportunity to go there. And I thought, well, you know what, let me just go and have a look. My hunch, I kind of had an instinct for maybe there's something different going to happen here.
Wow.
And sure enough, that's it. So I did this one trip in 2017 where I got actually this photo, as it happens, was one of the key images I got on that trip, because what there was this a very unusual fire hose event where lava comes out of the cliff from a lava tube, right, into the ocean. And that was all sort of linked, going all the way back to the summit crater, which was showing more activity as well, right? So we didn't really know it at the time. This was September 2017. But that was actually a bit of a hint that something bigger was coming, right? The following year. So we didn't know it at the time. So when I got, these images of the fire hose, I kind of got them published in a photojournalist sort of capacity with the newspapers and stuff, because it was a pretty rare event, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And this was one of the pictures from that particular event. And actually what happened was so I'm normally based in Hong Kong. I was in, this image got awarded in a competition that was then exhibited.
Really?
Yeah, it was then exhibited in London as part of the winners' exhibition. So because it was awarded, I got invited to go to the exhibition. So I went to London to see this image in the exhibition. And literally that week, so this was captured in September 2017. So in May 2018 was when the exhibition was. And I went there, and it just so happened, coincidentally with that, was the big earthquake and then the beginning of the new eruption in Hawaii. So I was like, oh, wow, I've got to try and get over there. So I spoke to the news agency who I have a relationship with, actually, published these and other photos. And I said, look, I can go. I've got my equipment with me. Let's do a deal. So we arranged something, for me to go kind of in an official sort of photojournalistic capacity. And so I went, and that's how it started.
Photos, right? Like a lot of photos, but like what we see is really
The film, yeah.
right?
So
Yeah,
I had both in the end. I was
yeah,
recording sort of a bit of everything in the end.
yeah. Just an
Yeah.
immense disaster, basically.
Well, we just, nobody knew. I mean, there was this big earthquake, and the summit crater had this, huge explosion, which was kind of the first signs of it. And then it kind of all unfolded from there. And I arrived pretty quickly, so fairly early on in the eruption sort of state. And I mean, again, nobody really knew how it would develop. It could have just died out as quickly as it started, but
Right.
in the end, it kind of developed into something really historic, right? It became the biggest eruption in 200 years. So,
Wow. And you were
but of
just like
course,
there, so close to it. What kind of feeling did you sense when things really started to go, well, let's say crazy,
well,
right? Because
so
yeah, you
it
say
kept
that.
changing. Yeah. So, I mean, when I arrived, actually, the first thing I did when I arrived was not really go to the areas of volcanic activity, because I'd been there the year before. I'd met a load of people there who kind of became friends, and they were local Hawaiians. And I kind of went to see them first. And at that point, they were already involved in what was called the Hub, which was this really cool community initiative to like help people who had already been displaced by the eruption. They'd already had their houses destroyed by lava. They had no homes to go to. They'd lost everything. So the Hub was set up as a way to help them, to get provisions and to give them food, free food. So donations basically came into the Hub, and people could come in, anybody could come in and help themselves to whatever they needed. And that was done in an unofficial capacity by the local community, alongside the official stuff like the Red Cross and other stuff like that, right? But the Hub became a real amazing place. So I went there because I knew that's where all my old friends were that I'd met. And and I just got this sense of community and this sort of social bonding and, this just really amazing thing. So I knew that was something I wanted to document, right? But I was going to come back to that later because all the lava activity was kind of going on now at the same time. So I immediately knew from the beginning that I had, there's a lava story and there's a human and animal story to tell here, right? And there's a lot to cover, right? And it was just me operating in that capacity. So I decided, obviously I'd come back to that, or I'd record that as and when that came up. But I focused initially, obviously, on the lava. And then I found out a location where there was a new surface breakout coming that was further down from where the housing estate eruption occurred, right, which was in Leilani Estates. So I got a tip off, and I decided to go there, right, as my first point of call, right, and that's how it all started. Because when I got there, sure enough, there was lava coming out of fields in the middle of nowhere, and like in a forest, and but there were some houses nearby. It was like a farmland area actually, and then that sort of developed into me being able to stay at some guy's house because he had a farmhouse that was right next to where this was erupting, and he was evacuating. So me and two other photojournalists kind of had an agreement with him that we would be able to stay in his house to look after it because they're worried about looting and problems like that.
Right.
If they evacuated,
that the case, actually,
there were some incidences of that, but it didn't happen obviously where we were. But we did hear stories of looting, unfortunately. People will just take an opportunity, in that situation, sadly. So people who were evacuating, they were concerned about their property, obviously, and they may not have had time to get everything out. So in this case, these guys said, well, you can stay here. They thought we were crazy, right? Because there's a volcano erupting literally outside their house. But we were like, no, okay, well, we'll look after your property for you, and assuming it doesn't get run over by lava, right? And that gave us somewhere to stay while everything was developing, right? And of course, there were risks in doing that, and we had to be very mindful of that, right? There were various threats to us, sort of by being in that precise location, because lava was coming up in all different places.
Did you dare to sleep at night when it?
No, so literally when I arrived and I did that, and I went to that location, that was the beginning of what was 3 weeks of really intensive, like work and stress and just it was like no sleep. You couldn't risk it. There was 3 of us there, but I was the only one who was there all the time. So the other 2 kind of were coming and going because they had other commitments, but I was able to just stay there. But basically, between the 3 of us, we were keeping watch on each other and doing our own things, but keeping out. We became really good friends, and we're still good friends today. Complete strangers, like guys I never met before. And we just lived together in this house, harmoniously, and just looking out for each other as friends. And just getting through it. But there was literally, you couldn't sleep, partly because of the constant earthquakes, just shaking the house the whole time, right? The explosions from one of the fissures that opened up was absolutely ferocious. I mean, it was literally like, it took your breath away. It's really hard. I mean, even when you watch the film, right? And I've tried to convey that in the film, that sort of feeling of the explosiveness and the ferociousness. I tried the best I can, but really there's nothing quite like having your breath taken away by an explosion that happens maybe, 100 meters away, but the shock wave, it hits you from the explosion, and it's literally like that. It's like a sonic boom, and it would shake the windows. Sometimes it would break some of the windows in the houses further down.
I mean, just having your story and the pictures of your film in my head just takes the breath away of me. Like right now, it's
right.
I've never quite felt anything close to such an eruption, but I feel like, wow, I would be afraid like 24/7 if I would be.
It's really violent. I can't exaggerate it. You can't exaggerate it. You literally, when you see, you can describe it and it sounds over the top, but then when you then experience it, you start to understand what I'm saying. It's like, it's really, and it really makes you feel this big, tiny, the power of nature, just like with such violence and ferocity, but beauty at the same time. So there's this really weird kind of dichotomy, you've got that sucks you in. It's creation and destruction at the same time, right? Literally simultaneously. And that's really what's so mesmerizing about it, and it sort of draws you in. It's dangerous if you get too close, and especially with the explosions. Like if you get too close to some of those explosions, they're so violent, they're so fast. Those rocks, when they fly through the air, I mean, I had to dodge some,
For real, wow.
Yeah, and I got a little bit, not injured from the rock, but from falling over trying to get away from one of those things, because some of them went really far. You'd be surprised how far they could actually throw up into the air. And so I think they went up to 1,200 feet, because a helicopter actually came down to 1,000 feet and found that they were going above them, so they had to climb. So they had to go to like 1,200 feet, and then horizontally they would go hundreds of meters. So, and they could destroy things like, and I saw one lava bomb that flown through the air and it broke a fence, a steel fence got bent like 90 degrees by one of those lava bombs, and nearly destroyed a house nearby. Took one guy's leg off, literally severed his leg nearly completely off.
Wow, so much destruction, right? But
yeah.
And the animals, what happened to them? Like,
so there was a bit of an issue with that animals. What can I say? As far as I was aware, there was no official effort by authorities to really help recover animals. A lot of it was done by just volunteers. But of course, the problem is, whether they were house pets or whether they were farm animals, right? One of the problems was that some of these evacuations occurred really suddenly, right? And quickly. In some cases, not really any warning, because the eruption occurred in lots of different places.
Right.
It's a bit hard to predict where the next one might come, to be fair, right? So, of course, naturally, some people wouldn't want to leave their home unless they had to. So they wouldn't necessarily prepare for evacuation. So, and there's a bit of, denial, like, you can understand, you don't want to leave your home, which
it's everything
you might never see again, right?
Yeah.
So, when you factor in animals for that, these people would leave and they might not have somewhere else to go. Imagine, right? This is the only place that you have to live. Suddenly you have to evacuate. Well, where do you go? Even if you go to a shelter, you can't take your animals with you. There's nowhere to put them. If they're farm animals, there's definitely nowhere to put them, right? So you kind of see how, you can, people can, difficult decisions to make about the animals and the wildlife. But there were some sad stories there as well, with the turtles that didn't survive, they come to a nesting area, and lava came there, and they weren't expecting it. Obviously, it was a pretty horrible story. I probably shouldn't go into it. It's pretty, if you're an animal lover, it would make you quite distressed, actually. Right. So they perished. But then, we questioned whether, something could have been done to rescue some of those, because that did have advance warning, right? So there was time to make a plan there. And it wasn't like people weren't, or like all the people that had been evacuated or saved, that, no human died as far as we know. So yeah, that was a bit of.
But I mean,
something.
it's already nice to hear, that there were some volunteer groups
Yeah,
who did the best they could, right, to help.
yeah.
And I feel obviously it's.
So I got involved with some of that because
Oh,
there were
nice.
some animals at the house where I was staying. Like one in particular was a horse in particular that turned up near the house. We didn't really know who it belonged to, but he looked in distress. He was, definitely malnourished and injured. We thought by the larva, but actually it wasn't the larva. But he was having trouble walking, and I had to make some inquiries, try and find out who owned him, at least to find out who might be responsible for looking after him. But nobody seemed to really take any responsibility. And then I just kept pushing and looking after him. I found some food and was feeding him, and he eventually take some food and water. It took some time, and it was a really nice engaging. It was a really nice moment to share with that horse, actually, because sometimes it was just me and the horse in this place. There was no one else around. And eventually, actually, the day that I had to evacuate, because the larva actually was becoming dangerously close to the house and going to cut off escape routes.
Right.
That particular day, finally, somebody took some responsibility for that horse and managed to get him out of there. And then he did eventually make some recovery and lived. Unfortunately, he's passed away recently. He was quite old, but he had remaining, few years of his life, ended up quite happy. So he actually did end up coming back to almost full health. And yeah, again, that was community driven. That was community donations to help save him from being put down and to keep him fed and to give him treatment because he had an abscess on his foot and all these things. So that was a happy story. And then there were some other really great local people, Hawaiian locals, who took it upon themselves to look after many rescued and abandoned animals, in their yard. And I went to visit one, and we interviewed her, an amazing woman. She's still a friend of mine today, but just incredible. All the different animals she was looking after that were not hers, right? They were just animals that people brought in because they had nowhere to put them. And she had at least some sort of facilities, but she didn't have a huge amount of land. So like all crammed in, all these animals crammed in.
At some point you have to say no then, right?
Yeah, and that's difficult, right? Yeah. So there weren't, obviously, there was a few others like that, but there weren't enough, unfortunately, to save all the animals,
Yeah. So now, you talked about all this risk, but if you hear about another eruption close by, are you gonna go again?
Well, yeah, yes, probably, if I can, under the right situation. Yeah. I mean, there was a recent refilling of the crater, the Halimau crater. So if you look at my film, towards the end, I put a little sequence of the crater after the eruption.
Right.
So it's pretty impressive because what happened was it was full of lava before, and then with the earthquake and something happened to the tube system. So what happened was that it drained. So all that lava drained out of the crater, and a huge amount, and it went somewhere. And obviously where it went was down in the Lower East Rift Zone, which is where all of those fissures erupted. So then when the eruption ended, there was like a pause, nothing happened. There was just a huge crater left behind, because when the lava empties, the walls are very unstable, and the walls will collapse in upon themselves as the lava drains to fill in the gap. But of course, it makes it bigger and bigger and bigger, and there were these continuous earthquakes. So it was this kind of, it became almost predictable. You could get like an earthquake and a collapse at the summit, and then there'd be a pause of some hours, and then later on there'd be suddenly a surge of lava coming down at the rift zone. You see, so they started to, the volcano observatory started to use that information to start trying to estimate when the eruption might end. Right. And actually it did. It sort of eventually gave clues to the ending of the eruption because of the change of the behavior. So all these really interesting scientific things that it's a massive amount. I mean, I think scientists are going to be studying this for their lifetimes, just from this eruption, the data they got from this eruption. Yeah. And they really learned so much from it. So scientifically incredible information that's coming from it. But so yeah, back to the crater. So that it emptied and it created this just giant crater, which is in the end of the film, towards the end of the film. But then recently there was a refilling. So what happened first was there was actually a crater lake. So water was filling in real time. You could literally see water starting to refill. We thought, oh, we're going to get this amazing crater lake, right, where the lava used to be. And that's what started happening. But then something happened and some lava came through some tubes on the sides of the crater walls from further down and filled in, and it's filled it pretty high. So so now it's full of lava again. Amazingly.
Unbelievable.
but it's very recently stopped flowing. But it could start at any point, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's clearly is some kind of fissure tubes sort of coming in from the sides of the crater wall. So who knows? At the moment, it's paused. They're calling it paused, but there's every possibility, being the most active volcano in the world, that it'll start again somewhere. But maybe not even Kilauea. So it might not be Kilauea. So Mauna Loa is the one they're watching, the really big volcano in Hawaii that hasn't erupted for some years, but could be due actually, because there's some activity there that indicates it might potentially erupt again in the not too distant future. And a Mauna Loa eruption is a bit more interesting because the flow of it would tends to go towards the big town there. Historically, it's gone towards Hilo town, so that's one to watch.
More dangerous then as well.
Yeah, well, in terms of, you know, evacuating Hilo would be a big thing, right? Because there's a lot more people living there than even Leilani estates.
Right. Well, Joseph Anthony, thank you so much for your great story, great pictures, and yeah, it's amazing to hear it firsthand from you. You know, who were this close. Thank you so much for having the time today to come say hi in our NaturVision Online Festival.
I hope you enjoy the film. It's been my pleasure.
Yes, of course, and yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to wish you a wonderful day, and yeah, enjoy the sun, right?
Sure. Thanks for watching, everyone.